Hello again, fellow Mystery Files. In this bonus episode, I will be reviewing the covers for the Poirot Investigates short story collection. Let's not forget the short story collections in this series. And the short stories here are a little odd because the covers tend to be like really generic and bland and kind of blah. Like, there's a lot of ways to go with it. I mean, because there's so many different stories in there, it feels weird to highlight just one or two on the cover, though quite a few covers actually do that. Other times you just have like a generic image. So, these aren't as interesting, I think, as some of the regular novels, but we'll get into it. Before I begin, make sure you like and subscribe to keep up to date with the channel. And we'll start out, as always, with the original cover. This is the original one from the Bodley Head, the UK edition. And it's just Poirot standing there looking a little triumphant, a little posing. I could see that like easily in like a portrait or something. And this cover is a very different. It is a different style than most of the original covers we've seen from the 1920s thus far. It actually just looks like a printed paper piece of manuscript. And it's fine. Again, I don't know what else you would really do. I think it's just fine to have Poirot on it. Looks a little bit like David Suchet, almost like 60 something plus years before David Suchet played Poirot. But here we are. It looks pretty good to me. We have this original US edition, and this is a kind of a weird one here. I mean, the Poirot looks really, tragic and depressing in that hideous green suit. I don't think Poirot would ever wear that. But another generic cover here with Poirot on the cover, and it says the most outrageously clever sleuth since Sherlock Holmes, Christie is tops, from the Boston Transcript. And you also see this book sells for 35 cents, which I make note of because at one point an edition of this book with this cover was the most expensive Christie novel ever sold in 2012, though that has since been surpassed by, I believe, an edition of the 13 Problems. We once again don't have any Fontana editions of this collection. I believe this is the last time we won't have any Fontana editions. I could be wrong about that. But we do have this Bantam reprint by Tom Adams, and this is actually another cover borrowed from another novel. This one's actually borrowed from the Murder in the Mews short story collection. And at least this one makes sense. We do have that Anubis head, which I believe references the adventure of the Egyptian tomb, which is a story in the Poirot Investigates collection. And it is a short story that is very prominent on a number of covers here. It is the one that they seem to like pull out most often, which is, I guess, makes sense. I know like the Egyptian theme is very common in murder mysteries, and it's deals with archaeology, which is very Christie-esque. Though to be honest, I don't think of like the Adventure of the Egyptian Tomb as like the best story in this collection. I don't know if that's necessarily the one that should be promoted the most often, but I guess it's probably the easiest one to make recognizable. We have this 2001 edition from HarperCollins, and this edition, I mean, this cover has been used for multiple editions since then. And again, we have a ship, which is a very common feature also. We'll see on some of these covers. We have two pairs of passengers entering a ship and some other people. Again, I think this is supposed to be the ship from the $1 Million Bond Robbery, which is, again, another short story. It's like, I don't know if this is like the most prominent story in this collection, but it's there, and we'll see this a lot. Again, a lot of these cover artists do have something for, ships. We see a lot of ships on covers, even if it's not necessarily the most sensical out there. We have this most recent UK edition from HarperCollins, and we have, once again, on a ship here. I think this is supposed to be Philip Ridgway and his fiancée. I believe her name was Esme from the $1 Million Bond Robbery, though, again, getting the scene is not in the $1 Bond Robbery. Again, I don't know why they keep picking the $1 Bond Robbery. It's not even like the first in the collection. I think if you're going to pick one story from the collection, it should be either like the titular story, but there is no titular Poirot Investigates story, or the first story, which would be The Adventure of the Western Star, or like the most like famous story from the collection. For me, that would probably be Jewel Robbery at the Grand Metropolitan, but again, sticking with the $1 Bond Robbery. Again, they do look like Tommy and Tuppence, these two on the cover, but again, it is, I think, Philip Ridgway and his fiancée. We have these beautiful Waterstone edition here. We have Poirot's hat. I believe it's a Homburg hat. I'm not sure. I'm not good with hats. Revealing a pool of blood with a gun in it. Again, very sort of generic mystery here. I think this is an excellent cover. I really love these Waterstone designs. They're very nice. Again, this one does, it doesn't like pinpoint a specific story. It just sort of more gives like a generic, this is a mystery collection sort of look that I think is really nice. We have this most recent vintage UK US edition, and I believe this depicts the tragedy at Marsden Manor. That is a story where the victim is found murdered on the grounds of his estate. And I think this is a good choice to depict on the cover because it is sort of like generic. It is the only story I think that fits this cover, but it does sort of just give like a more like generic mystery sort of vibe, which is I think probably ideal for a short story collection. We have this Berkeley edition from the 1990s. This is the edition that I read from, and yes, I do associate Poirot Investigates with the color dark blue. I'd say my edition, the Agatha Christie signature is written in silver, but here it seems to be like a white with blue outline. It's very strange. But here we have depicted three different short stories here. We have, of course, the ship from the $1 million bond robbery. We have pyramids from the adventure of the Egyptian tomb. And then we have a pearl necklace that probably comes from jewel robbery at the Grand Metropolitan. I suppose it could be the Adventure of the Western Star, but I believe that's just one large diamond that's stolen there. And in the Metropolitan one, it is a pearl necklace or a series of gems. I don't quite recall. Again, I'm not the most expert at the short stories. I have read them multiple times, but they don't stick in my head as well as the novels do. But again, really like this cover. I always like these sort of like collection covers, though again, I do think it's weird to depict some stories on the cover. Again, you obviously can't cover all of them, and I guess these are just the most recognizable ones. We have this 2016 HarperCollins edition with a shady, shadowy Poirot climbing some steps. Again, obviously, like on the prowl for a criminal, which is very weird. He doesn't really chase down criminals too much. But again, this is a nice cover. It's rather generic, of course. And he has Poirot. And, I don't know what else you would do here. But again, very nice cover. I like it. And there's a lot going on this New Delhi Books edition. This is actually an Indian edition, but it is English language. I like how the Poirot Investigates Agatha Christie words are sort of like blood splatter. That gives it a nice little touch. I haven't really seen that before. We have an upside down smoking gun at the top of the page. That's a little weird. Why is it upside down? Though I do kind of like that image, and I like the style here. But I have to be honest, I have no idea what this image is. Like, I don't recall any of the short stories potentially being this one. And it does look like we have Hastings and a woman here. I don't know who that is. Like, maybe it's Miss Lemon, but I don't really know. And maybe it's not even Hastings. And I don't recall a Dalmatian ever being here. I don't recall them ever going to like a seaside sort of town. I really don't know what scene this is, though it's a nice image. I like the cover. I'm just not sure what it is. We have this 1980 Bantam edition, and you'll notice again this says by the author of Sleeping Murder. Some of these 1980 Bantam editions did say that Sleeping Murder had been the last Christie novel published. These were published right after her death, so I think they were trying to sort of bring back those older titles to new audiences after her death, when I guess the publicity was high. And also perhaps right after an author dies, there's like a little bit where they get a little more popular, but then they start cratering in popularity a bit. So I think the Christie estate was probably trying to stave off that, which I would argue they did successfully. And this is the cover I see most often. I think this is probably the most popular, most well-known Poirot Investigates cover. We have Poirot's hat with his little mustache, or his big mustache, I guess I should say. I see this cover a lot. I think this is probably the most popular cover, and I really like it a lot. It's simple, it's minimalistic, and it does its job. We have this Kindle edition from Spitfire. And again, this is another one that has a really nice image. I really like this scene and the colors and all that, but I'm not sure what this is depicting. I get it's sort of generic here, and it sort of gives off that like lavish, nostalgic, like luxury that evokes like 1920s mysteries because people are always getting murdered at parties and mansions and all that. Again, not really sure what specifically this scene depicts, but again, it's a nice scene. I like the cover. We have this 1955 Pan edition, which has a gun wrapped in some kind of material, I guess to hide it. I'm not really sure if this is supposed to be a scene from a specific story. There are a few that use like firearms. That gun is too small to be Marston Manor. It could be Mystery of Hunter's Lodge. It could be. I actually think it could be from The Adventure of the Cheap Flat because that one has sort of like a weird ending that gets a little thrillery. But again, it's probably just like a generic image. I think it works well. I mean, the firearms are used in a few of these stories, and it's sort of like an image that evokes the mystery sort of more generically. We have this other Pan edition, and this is another like weird sort of image here. I believe this is supposed to depict the kidnapped prime minister short story, though to me it really looks like Poirot is blinding the prime minister, but I think in reality he's probably taking the blindfold off. Alternatively, I mean, I guess you could interpret this as that's Hastings being blindfolded by Poirot, because how many times Poirot misleads Hastings, or rather Hastings misleads himself. And again, this is sort of a weird image. I really do like it, though. I It's so weird to me because I think it makes Poirot look a bit of a villain here. I don't think that's intentional, though. We have this 100th anniversary edition, and I really like this cover too. We have pearls and we have jewels, and again, this is combining the two like jewel theft stories: The Adventure of the Western Star and Jewel Robbery at the Grand Metropolitan. Again, I don't know who that man is supposed to be in the mirror. I guess it's Hastings, but it's such a weird choice to pick Hastings and not Poirot. Like, I don't know why in a book called Poirot Investigates, you wouldn't just put Poirot on the cover if you're putting a person. But this is a nice image. I really enjoy this art style. It looks hand drawn. As I've told you in past episodes, I'm not the greatest like in terms of like art terms here, but I really like this image. This looks like an old like sort of cartoon like you would see in like newspapers or magazines. I really like this cover. We have this 1997 HarperCollins edition, once again depicting the adventure of the Egyptian tomb. Really like that like Anubis jackal sort of shadowy figure lurking in the back there. It's really interesting. It makes it give it like this really like sinister sort of feel to it. And some of these stories do feel a little bit sinister. In particular, this one I think has really devious plot. Again, I really like this image. I really like this series of covers here from HarperCollins. I suspect a lot of you might have these covers. I believe these are the covers that came out like right after I purchased all of my Christie books. Had it been like a year or two later, I probably would have all of these covers instead. We have this 1990s Bantam edition from the Murder Most British collection. And this is a really good cover. I really like this one. It has Poirot, but he's surrounded by sort of like generic Poirot mystery things like a cigar, or maybe that's a ring. That's a diamond ring, actually. We have his hat, a flower, the traditional like British teacup, a glass. We have a big stone. I think that's probably the Western Star. Again, I really like this cover. It sort of like combines like the collection sort of covers with also just like a more generic like Poirot tribute type thing going on. Now, moving on to some foreign language covers, we have this Italian Oscar Mondadori edition. And this is sort of like a generic Poirot. I think that's probably Georges, like looking over a balcony. And again, not really sure what's going on here. This could be an image. I'm sort of getting like Adventure of the Italian Nobleman vibes from this. I'm not sure why. Again, I guess this could be really any sort of like generic story in the collection. I wish like the figures were a little more prominent so we could just see them better. But again, not a bad cover overall. We have this other Italian Mondadori collection cover, And I really like this image. This image was very clever. We have Poirot pulling back a maze to reveal something underneath. And I really like this. This was sort of like a literal sort of image of how Poirot, pulls back the covers, pulls back, the maze of clues and solves the crime. I thought it was a very interesting cover, very creative, especially for like a collection like this. They sort of went like the generic, let's put Poirot on the cover, but they did something a little different with it, and I really liked it. We have this Arabic edition, and I thought this was a really interesting cover. We sort of like that ghostly hand probably calling for help. And I'm not exactly sure what specific short story this is supposed to be, or if it's just supposed to be a more generic cover, but I actually really like it. It gets a little creepy, a little sinistery, and actually, and to me, it comes to mind like a lot of like those John Dixon Carr sort of like ghost impossible crime stories he would have. Again, I like this cover, not sure what it's supposed to be, but again, that's going to be the case with a lot of these. We have this Polish edition, once again depicting the adventure of the Egyptian tomb. You will believe how many covers I saw that did depict the story that I just didn't even put in this video. Like, I don't know how many times I could keep bringing it up. But I like this cover because it has like that lightning strike in the background, really playing up the sort of more sinister atmosphere. And I think if you are going to play up that sinisteriness, it is good to depict this story. I think this story is particularly like brutal and evil. So I think it's a very good job here. I like this cover, especially having like this Anubis figure. I don't think I mentioned this previously, but Anubis is like the two-faced jackal who has like two different personalities. So I think that works very well in a mystery story, in particularly this one. We have this Turkish edition, once again displaying a jewel on the cover. Again, probably the Western Star, could be jewel robbery at the Grand Metropolitan. And it looks very elegant. I like this one because I also think of Poirot sometimes can be very elegant. His stories are sort of like luxurious and clean. And we have like a little blood splatter, just like a little tiny bit on the cover, giving it a little hint of mystery, but also still like remaining elegant. Like that red is very bright, very vibrant. I like this cover a lot. We also have this Turkish edition, and this is actually, it claimed to be Turkish for young readers. I actually suspect, because the title is in English, this might be English for like new English learners who speak Turkish. I mean, that's my guess here. I'm not entirely sure because the website I found it on was all in Turkish. And I really like this cover. We have Poirot and Hastings staring out the window. And what I like about it, this is drawn very much in the style of like those Charles Adams Family cartoon, like from the strips, the cartoon strips, not from like an animated series. I really like this. It did give it sort of like another little bit of creepiness, but not like but creepy in like in a fun way. So I really enjoyed this cover a lot. We have this Bulgarian edition that looks eerily similar to the Berkeley edition that I have. Again, it depicts the same three stories on the cover: $1 million bond robbery, adventure of the Egyptian tomb, and jewel theft at the Grand Metropolitan. Again, it just has like a yellow text box instead of blue, which again, Poirot Investigates is dark blue, not yellow. But anyway, it's a nice cover. I actually think the images on this cover are a lot clearer than on the Berkeley edition one. Like, I think the on the Berkeley edition, the pearl necklace looks like a little bit like a worm, to be honest. It's not very a decent drawing, I'll say. I think these pictures are actually a lot clearer. We have this Portuguese Odysseus ASA edition, and I really like this image. These Portuguese images are very nice. I know someone told me about these on the channel, so I make sure to cover them all the time now. It's a very nice art style. I like this. We have a very big, prominent Poirot on the cover as he stands before a window showing a country village. A lot of these do take place in a country village, so I think that's a nice image. I like that it's nighttime. We have like a crescent moon glowing in the background. This is a very nice image for a short story collection all about Poirot. We have this Portuguese record edition, and I was really debating, like, is this actually a book cover, or this really looks like a really bad like 1980s like PC video game with those graphics. And we do have a woman wearing a jewel that's probably the Western Star, and we have a figure like a young man handing her an envelope. I don't know who that is. He actually looks like Link from The Legend of Zelda, or even like Peter Pan or Shaggy from Scooby Doo. Like, I don't know who that is. And there's also another figure in the back you can't make out clearly. I just thought this image was funny, but it actually kind of works for this short story collection. It does have, Jewel Robbery, the Grand Metropolitan, or The Adventure of the Western Star, and sort of like others more like generic images. I just thought this one was really funny. And we have this tie edition, and I really liked this one because the Poirot on it is clearly based off the Peter Ustinov Poirot. Usually we get him based off of the David Suchet, or just like a sort of a generic, like same sort of look as David Suchet, even if it's pre-Suchet. But here we have Peter Ustinov, and I rarely, if ever, see like a Peter Ustinov like Poirot on a book cover, so I thought that was interesting. And again, we have a lot of just like generic images here. We have like a bullet, a hat, a teacup, a diamond, a chalice. I think this really works nice as a cover. And then we have this Vietnamese edition from the publishing house. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce this. And again, another like generic Poirot standing in front of a country house on one side. On the other side, it looks like we have Jules. Again, very much just covering all of their bases here. Country House, Jules covers a good chunk of the short stories here. I actually think that's very interesting that they tried to like just use generic images to cover multiple stories rather than just like sticking with one or two. I think that was a job well done here. And once again, I asked ChatGPT to create for me a book cover for Poirot Investigates, and this was the result. And again, it's another one of these more like generic with certain items on it. We have a stopwatch, which was interesting. I don't recall seeing a stopwatch from any of the other covers, so I wonder where ChatGPT found that from. We have two gems, sort of generic, representing the jewel theft stories. We have a gun, which covers some bases. We have Poirot with the magnifying glass. Again, all makes sense. And this is actually the first time the ChatGPT bot used Christie's signature on the book. A lot of the more recent covers do use that Christie signature on the book cover, but ChatGPT did not until this one. I think that's really interesting. And this signature, it's close. I don't think it could pass as a forgery. So if you thought like ChatGPT could be a forgery, I think it would fail. But it is very close. Like on first glance, it does look correct, though I think the spacing, like in Agatha, between the G and the A is a little too wide, and also in Christie, that S looks really separate, more so than it is. And then also in the Agatha, the cross that goes over the T is a little off, so I don't think it quite works as a forgery. But again, this is a pretty nice cover here. Again, looks like Poirot. We didn't get like a weird like Hastings on it like we did with Murder on the Link. So again, I thought it was a pretty good cover. And that is it for this video. Let me know what you think about these covers from Poirot Investigates. As always, if you see an edition I did not cover and you want me to cover in the future videos, just let me know and I'll try to do my best to make that happen. The next entry into this series will be The Man in the Brown Suit, and what do you know? Another novel that's going to have ships all over the cover. I can't wait. Until next time, Mystery Files.